Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing good, man. All right.
Cool.
Welcome to this podcast is Uncalled For.
What's uncalled for about it?
Well, you can't tell anybody this.
I'm listening.
Oh my god, what are you doing? I didn't see the big deal about the human body.
I worship Cthulhu just for the free beer.
Yeah, and don't go to Sam's Club either.
But you didn't even give him a chance for a wild card spot.
What are we doing at Tijuana?
And he was like, what did you just say?
Well, the name of this podcast is Stuff Uncalled For?
This podcast is uncalled.
Podcast, all right.
Yeah, that was the most ridiculous ending to that game that I've ever seen.
Oh my gosh, I gotta hurry up. Oh my gosh, I gotta hurry up. Oh my gosh, I gotta hurry up.
We're looking at each other in the eye. We're not going to say anything derogatory to the other person. And, of course, neither of us is drunk.
So I don't hear Pope Francis saying that he's a prophet, seer, and revelator.
What planet are these people on?
And the book, thank you, back from.
See, this is a disgrace.
How'd that happen?
And it's got Chick-fil-A.
Hey, we're getting somewhere.
And now, your host for this podcast, Mike Chernevsky.
Fuji!
Welcome to the podcast. Special thanks to Kansas City Fringe Festival for hosting the first 3 episodes of season 3 of this podcast is Uncalled For. Those were in video form. If you're listening to me speaking right now, those episodes are available now in audio form. So today we're going to wrap up the Fringe parts of season 3. I'm going to share with you the Q&A that was done live. We'll do it live for Kansas City Fringe Festival. I want to thank Ashley Helm for not only doing a very good job with this interview, but also giving me permission to use the interview for the podcast, provided we don't make money off of it. And in case you're wondering, I have never made money from this podcast. It is now and will always be available to you guys, my listeners, for free. I did have to cut out some things from the interview that pertain specifically to Fringe. Specifically, you can pay X amounts to see the shows, everything, and that's because that is no longer going to be valid by the time this episode is released. However, you can still see the video on Facebook. The KC Fringe Facebook page is where this video will live. Anyway, without further ado, here is the Fringe Q&A interview.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Ashley Helm, and today I am here with Mike Chernesky. I'm so sorry. Chernesky. Thank you. To discuss his podcast that was Uncalled For. So if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your show, that'd be great.
Yeah, no problem. I'm Mike Chernevsky, as previously stated. The podcast I'm working on right now is called This Podcast is Uncalled For. It is essentially an autobiography built around interviews and with the occasional thoughts episode. And it's available now. The first 2 seasons are available now on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, pretty much every podcast software that's out there right now. Plus the 3 episodes that will be starting our 3rd season, you can see right now during KC Fringe virtual edition.
Yeah, I think that's such a fun way to kick off the start of your 3rd season is by doing it with KC Fringe. So that's kind of exciting for us too. And we're really happy to have you. And thanks for being here today.
No problem.
Yeah, so how long have you been creating podcasts, and what inspired you to start creating them?
Okay, so the first podcast I ever did, December 2012, is the first podcast that was called Sunflower Brew. And for that one, I was just a producer and editor for that. I've been working in video and film and TV much longer than that. So with that video and TV knowledge, which includes editing knowledge, by the way, I had some basic understanding of how podcasts worked and everything. So we did Sunflower Brew. We did that for about a year. And it was a political discussion while drinking beer. And they were always craft beers. And it's always Kansas politics. It's Sunflower. And that went to the wayside because the hosts had twins. And I started a second podcast about the same time this one was ending. That one was called Winning Side Coaches. That lasted a good 5 years and was primarily a sports discussion podcast with me and a cadre of friends, one of whom unfortunately left the world a few years ago. Mm-hmm. It was all in good fun, all in good times. And with that one, it came to a point where I got less interested in sports on the field and more interested in lawsuits. All right. With this particular podcast, I started it May of last year, May 2019. One of my coworkers, I teach chess part-time. And one of my chess coworkers asked, well, you have a lot of life experience. Why not try to write a book, an autobiography? And I thought, well, I don't exactly feel like doing a book. So instead I'll do a podcast. I'll invite friends of mine who I know very well and have for years in different areas of my life, invite them to do this podcast. And on occasion, I'll do what I said, it's called Thoughts episodes. I'll get in front of Mike solo and just for filler purposes, do a talk on certain topics. And I've been known to recycle some of that older stuff, particularly Winning Side. I've recycled quite a bit for this podcast. And it's been a lot of fun so far.
That's great. And I think that's cool that you've actually had a variety of different podcasts leading up to now. And I think that's really great. You do have the opportunity to share your stories with other people. How would you describe your podcast to new listeners, and what makes it different from other podcasts?
Well, most podcasts are centered around one subject or another. It's not an overall look at someone's life like my podcast is. And it's with people I know. Pretty much everyone who's been interviewed for my podcast is someone I have known for quite a while. And I think that's part of what makes it so rewarding, is that it is people I know, people I've shared experiences with, that I'm asking to come on and share those experiences and give my perspectives and everything.
Absolutely. I think, getting to work with your friends is, in a creative process, is I think it's a wonderful feeling, and it's kind of makes it so much more fun and rewarding in a way. So do you want to talk about your original vision for your show in KC Fringe when it was still the in-person festival versus kind of how you had to adapt it for the digital version?
Yes. So pretty much everyone that you're seeing now in the digital version, if we had been allowed to do a live show, they would have been interviewed on stage in front of an audience. That's pretty much the only difference between what would have happened and what did happen.
For sure. That definitely would have been like fun to see, sit in the audience live and watch you put that on. And I know a couple of podcasts, like I know Welcome to Night Vale came to Iowa City one year and they do stuff like that. Or there's like murder. I know that's a common theme, so that's really cool that you're going to do that with a festival. And I think it's the first time. I'm pretty new to KC Fringe. This is my second year working with them, but I believe that would have been the first time that we would have had something like that. So I think that's really cool to see. Super fringy. So
I believe you are correct, and I've been a volunteer with KC Fringe since 2011. So this is my first year as a Fringe contributing artist.
That's great. Yeah, volunteering, I think, I don't know, I love our volunteers. It's almost like a Fringe family, and it's a great time. But yeah, I think Fringe is cool because there's just such a variety of shows. Like people can really put on whatever they want. So like, you doing your podcast, it's different for a performing arts festival, but it still totally fits in. And I think that's pretty neat.
Yeah. I like that better than my brother. I have two brothers, one sister. One of my brothers lives in Oklahoma and is the father of my two nieces and nephew. And I told him, I was in the Fringe Festival this year. And he's like, oh, so you're going to talk about nipple piercings and tattoos? Like, no, that's not what it's about at all. So, yeah.
That's funny. Well, it's Fringe. You are welcome. Technically, it's uncensored, unjuried, so you can go out there, which is another fun part of it. But that's funny. Your show description says you like to interview interesting people. How do you find your people you host on your podcast, and how would you define interesting?
Well, as I've already stated, everyone that's been interviewed for the podcast is someone I've known for quite some time. So basically, my cadre of friends from various walks of life, everything. And I feel everyone that I've had on the podcast has a unique little something to add to the story, and that I find is interesting.
For sure. I myself just find people, even the most boring people, to be fascinating in their own sense, or even if they're really different than me. I think that's almost makes them more interesting when someone is nothing like me or nothing I'd even like aspire to be. But I think I just find people really interesting because they are so different.
Mm-hmm.
So you submitted 3 episodes for the Fringe Festival, which are all available now. You can watch on Vimeo, and tickets are now on sale. But which one did you have the most fun creating, and why?
Well, in a strict sense of the term, I had fun with all 3 of them. I'm going to say the one with Brian Boy was the most fun because it's 2 filmmakers talking about all sorts of crazy stuff, including but not limited to Thanksgiving, which is a holiday term that Brian actually coined, centered around the annual release of the McRib at McDonald's. I thought that was interesting to explore everything. Adam and Luke and Dan I've had on the podcast before, actually. So this was a return trip for all of them. And yeah, fun in their own little ways. Although I should remind Luke, no, Manchester City and Paris Saint-Germain have never been to the UEFA Champions League finals. And no, David Beckham never played for Arsenal. So.
That's great. We actually got a question in the comments, and it's kind of a combination of a question I had written up as well. So Ashley wants to know, can you tell us about your most interesting podcast interview?
Most interesting podcast interview? That is a tough one because I think they're all good interviews, but I would probably say my favorite so far has been with Conrado Salazar. Conrado is someone I met through my boss at the chess club as a way of paying my car off. And I had to do errands for the chess club for a while, and one of them was to taxi Conrado from his house out in Edwardsville all the way to the chess club up in, at the time it was in Liberty, and then we briefly moved to KC North for a little bit. I want to say North KC, but that confused a lot of people. Anyway, one of those particular trips, I just asked him, "Hey, do you mind if I record our conversation for the podcast?" And he said, "Yeah, go ahead." And that became probably my favorite episode of the run so far. And that is available for download. Again, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, all that good stuff. And one of my favorite stories involving Conrado, that one of the first times I met him, we and my boss and another guy went out to St. Louis. St. Louis has a very nice chess club set up. So nice, in fact, they invite grandmasters out there to participate in a tournament every year. It's called the Sinkfield Cup. And we got to see a little bit of the Sinkfield Cup. So I got to see in person the likes of Magnus Carlsen and Vichy Anons and Hikaru Nakamura, just to name a few, playing each other. And it's very cool. And near the end of our stay there, Conrado had a chessboard autographed by Vichy Anons. And right after that autograph took place, I asked him, "Hey, do I mind if I get a photo of you guys?" And he said, "Yeah, sure, go ahead." And that became a pretty famous photo around the local chess community.
Hey, that's great. And that sounds like a wonderful experience.
Mm-hmm.
So during this pandemic, it's been it's been an interesting time for sure. How has creating podcasts helped you through the pandemic, and how has the creative process changed for you during this time?
Well, it certainly has changed the way I record the podcast, because normally it would be one-on-one. But of course, we're not supposed to be doing that right now. So thank God for programs like Zoom and everything, because that's how I recorded all three of the shows that you're seeing at Fringe this year. I hope to get some more interviews in the coming days, but if not, I've got at least 5 more episodes in the can ready to go for season 3. And just see what happens. I don't think it affected me a creative sense, although I'm doing a lot of deliveries right now, because people have to eat still. That's how we survive, is we eat and everything. But it'll be interesting to see what happens with the rest of this season, and hopefully more seasons to come.
For sure. I know during quarantine I've been eating way more than usual, so I'm sure you've been busy with delivery driving. But yeah, that's good. You do have some podcasts, sitting in the can, because just right now has been such an interesting time for our artists, because we just have to adapt to be virtual when usually it's a process that involves with, so many people being together in person. So that's great you're able to continue that, though. Do you have any particular one podcast interview question you really love to ask, and why?
So far, my favorite podcast question to ask, at least in terms of this podcast is uncalled for, I'm going back to the second episode of the podcast ever recorded with a local actor. His name is Trevor Martin, whom I've worked with a couple times on film projects. But one project I wanted to ask him most about was a commercial he had done. He did a commercial for Minsky's Pizza. I don't know which one. I don't know if you are familiar with any of the Minsky's commercials. It's the one with Graham Zusi of Sporting Kansas City delivering a pizza to a family. Right? Trevor plays the father of that family. And it's really interesting to hear the backstory behind that commercial that he found out about after attending a KU game. He spared my feelings, of course, saying, I'll just say, out of respect to you, I had tickets to a team that wears blue, but not Duke blue or UMKC blue. But yeah, I know what you're talking about. And it was interesting backstory, how many times he had to go through that audition to get the parts, and his interactions with Mr. Zusi. Everything definitely worth a listen, and definitely, I think, one of the more interesting questions that's been asked on the podcast so far.
For sure. We'll definitely need to check that out. I think, I think the process behind making commercials is very interesting, and it is very different than other parts of like the acting and just media world. So I'm sure that would be really cool to check out. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. What is a misconception some people have about you or your work?
That make any money off of it? I do this completely for the love of doing a podcast, the love of creating everything. If I'm making money off of any media, it's probably going to be video. You're talking to someone who, again, has years in independent film, television. I interned at KCPT for a while. And did a lot of independent film. I have a web series to my credit as well. And a lot of that I've done for free, everything. But yeah, again, gotta make money somehow, and using my talents to make money. And I've had a lot of interesting opportunities in terms of paid video. The biggest, probably the most continuous, pandemic or not, would be with the League of Women Voters of Johnson County. So what they had me do is during their monthly meetings, they had me come and just shoot the thing and then post it on their YouTube channel. So that's always fun. And of course, I have to, it doesn't pay nearly enough to live off of. So things like doing deliveries or teaching chess also come into play.
Yeah, that's great. You're able to do all those different things. And I think so many people are unaware of all the opportunities that do exist for film creators and editors, because that's not a job someone might particularly think of as, filming government meetings. But my sister, who studied film as well, actually had a very similar job. So I think there's always there is opportunity out there for sure. But that's really interesting to hear. And then this question's kind of similar to the other one we asked earlier, but is there a particular episode you have created or person you interviewed that has had a profound impact on you?
Well, again, they're all friends of mine, and in a different way, each one has been impactful to me. But my favorite's still the one with Conrado.
For sure. That's great. Yeah, we'll definitely have to check that out then. So, like he said, you can find the podcast on a variety of different, podcast websites. And so definitely check it out. Thank you so much for being with us today. Do you have any last words or anything you want to share?
No, not in particular. Just support the podcast, either here at Fringe or go to your Apple Podcasts and all that stuff. Subscribe to the podcast. All this will be released starting in August, and we'll release every other week. And also check out our Facebook page. We have a Facebook page too. It's facebook.com/uncalledforpodcast. Definitely check that out because I post stuff related to the podcast there. And that's about it.
For sure. Yeah, so definitely check out This Podcast is Uncalled For on Facebook and, Apple Podcasts and all that. It's so important to support independent artists and local artists, so definitely check them out. Tomorrow we won't have a live Q&A, but we will be posting a Q&A with one of our visual artists. And Tuesday, I believe we're going live with the team behind the show Rise. So thank you so much again for being with us here today. I hope you have a wonderful night.
Thank you. You too.
And then we had one last comment. Ashley says, I like the St. Louis compliments. I'll check it out, the Uncalled For podcast. And says, thank you.
Okay, I do need to talk about St. Louis real quick if we're still rolling.
Yeah, go ahead.
So yeah, in addition to the chess club, people who know me know that I was the biggest St. Louis Ram fan around. So obsessed with them. Even when they were in Los Angeles the first time around, Eric Dickerson was my favorite player growing up, and then they moved to St. Louis my junior year of high school, coincidentally the year I started playing football, and that was just awesome to have them so much closer to me, being in Kansas City as opposed to elsewhere. And I was fortunate enough to attend a few games in St. Louis and everything. And sadly, that ended in January 2016, where they ripped my heart out and said, we're moving back to LA because St. Louis, they're all bad football fans. It's a baseball town and all that. So that sort of thing, that's the sort of thing that turns people into non-fans right away.
For sure.
And to this day, it's been, I really can't watch a football game anymore without thinking about that and everything. And it goes back to what I said earlier with my second podcast. I became less interested in what was on the field and more interested in lawsuits. There's a big one in St. Louis, October next year. It goes to trial. So.
Oh wow, that's wild. That was definitely a heartbreaking moment though for St. Louis to be leaving us. But that's kind of crazy that you loved them when they were back in LA, and then they did become a Missouri team.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being with us here today. I hope you have a wonderful night.
Oh, thank you. You too.
Thank you.
This podcast is Uncalled For is hosted, produced, and edited by Mike Chernevsky. Opening music is Fantasia by Kevin MacLeod at incomptech.com. Licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 4.0 license. The outro music for all of the 2020 KC Fringe Festival interview episodes is Torchlight Tango main theme by Jesse Spillan, licensed under Attribution license. Additional music included Morocco Sting by Kevin MacLeod at incomptech.com, license under Creative Commons by Attribution 4.0 license. Please like, share and subscribe to the podcast through your favorite podcasting platform. Like our Facebook page at facebook.com/uncalledforpodcast and check out our blog with show notes at uncalledfor.home.blog.
Thank you so much for listening. We will see you next time.